Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in. Welcome back, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Happy Monday.
Yeah, it is a good Monday.
It's a good Monday. It's been full of rest for me, so that's good.
That's great. You're still kind of recovering from feeling not optimal, so I think a good rest day is probably well deserved.
I think it was very needed. Yeah. Okay, so actually, one of the reasons I really needed some rest was we spent this last weekend, we had a conference here in Wichita. And so I was pretty involved with that from Thursday through Sunday. And with my body still recovering from being unwell, I was especially exhausted from it. However, I wanted to talk a little bit about something kind of a new revelation for me. I'm not saying this is a new revelation in the world, a new revelation for me from this weekend. We've talked about some of this for years now, because we've almost been doing this podcast for 3 years. Josh, it's almost been 3 years.
Isn't that crazy?
It's wild to me. But for so many years, I've been seeking oneness, like oneness within myself and oneness with the Lord. And I feel like I've gotten closer and closer and closer to that, which is not actually what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the concept of loving yourself. So, yes, there's the commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. And then we all like to talk about, well, how can you love your neighbor if you don't love yourself? But what I want to talk about with that is how can you be one with the Lord and not love yourself? Because I was in one of the sessions that I was teaching, I was talking about a little bit of this. And one of the kind of practical things that we did, and it was really focusing on being able to love others the way that the Father loves others, was we did an exercise where we really focused in, and then the individual asked the Father to show them someone through his eyes. And in my experience, when I have done this, I've been like blown over, like wildly overwhelmed with how he sees other people, like the depth of love that he has for them. And so I would argue that oneness with him would then result in the ability to essentially be in that place all the time, to be able to see through his eyes and all those things. But that being said, the Lord was really challenging me in like, you want to be one with me, but you refuse to look at yourself the way that I look at you. So how are you going to be able to look at others through my eyes if you won't look at yourself through my eyes?
Mhm. Yeah, that's such a powerful thing to think about. And we've talked a lot about, like you said, love your neighbor as you love yourself, which is probably why some of us aren't very good neighbors because we don't really love ourselves. Um, and it is interesting, like in a Western culture, that loving yourself has a narcissistic, self-centered,
Pride
um,
almost.
kind of meaning. And that's not really it at all, because that's also not really loving yourself. I would say that is just the other end of the spectrum of like self-hate. Like,
Mhm.
and maybe in some regards is still self-hate. You're like, oh, I really don't like this about me, so I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna have a me day. Um, that's really not what we're talking about when we say love yourself. It's like truly learning to love who you were created to be. And when you do that, then you start behaving in the way that you were truly created to be.
Mhm.
Um, and that's like, I think it's such a powerful thing. I don't know how, like, I don't know how easy it is. Like for me, I would say learning to love myself has been a multi-year focus, because like you can ask most of my friends, like self-deprecating humor was just the way that I functioned for many years and still sometimes is, but I like really actively work to not do that, to actually just enjoy who I am. And I've definitely gotten glimpses of it. But I know that I still have quite a ways to go in that process. And you were talking about like the difference between seeing yourself through God's eyes and seeing someone else. Sometimes I think it's easier for him to show you someone else because, especially if it's someone you're not super close with, because you don't know all of the shortcomings. Like
Mm.
you're just like, oh yeah, I can see that person objectively from the outside without seeing all the things that I don't like about them. Probably a little bit harder with a like spouse or a close friend or something who you see every day and you've seen their highs and lows. May not be as easy. But I do think that it sometimes is easier for him to show us somebody else because we don't have that lens towards them in the same way. I think it's tougher when it's us because we've been us our whole life and we know all the times we've fallen short. We know all the times we've missed the mark. And we
Mhm.
know all the times we wish we would have done better. Um, but I really think that that's not like we have to learn to look past those things because he looks past those things when he looks at us. And it's not that they don't matter, but when you really get into your real identity, when you really get into love, those things stop. Like the things you don't like about yourself go away. They don't just get minimized, they go away when you start walking in your true identity. Mm.
Right. And I would also say this. So, our friend Camille, you were here for this part, Josh. Our friend Camille was talking about really kind of reuniting with your body and getting into a place of reconciliation with your body and apologizing for the things that you've done to it that have been out of line, all of these things. And that was the evening after I was kind of getting that word from the Lord about this. But I think it's so imperative because we do well, I mean, we do. We have actively worked because we've gone along on this journey together for so long. I know that we've both actively worked toward oneness within ourselves, and with the Lord. And um, there has been a lot of body work that has gone into that and reconciliation and really going back and healing some traumas that have happened.
Mm.
Um, but it's an interesting thing when coming into that oneness with the Lord, um, and how some of that reconciliation kind of shows itself as, at least for me, as not being complete. Like I think, oh man, I've done this. I've done this so many times. We've been through this. Like I thought we were fine. We're okay. Um, and when I'm faced with that, like truly when I'm faced with the Father saying to me, like, when are you gonna love yourself? Because how am I going to work with you in alignment and as one when you can't love yourself? When, I mean, I even just taught this weekend. Let me just tell you, I even just taught this weekend on love being the very essence of God. And he's like, when you can't even embrace that, the very essence of me within yourself,
Mm.
even when I'm like residing within you, how are we going to move as one? How are you going to do this? Yes, you allow it for others, but if you won't allow it to envelop you and flow through every cell and every part of your being, then how are we going to do this? How do we become one when my very essence you're blocking? And boy, Josh, you guys, it just kind of knocked the wind out of me a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
Because every now and then you think you're doing like really good, like you're on a good trajectory. You know what I mean? Like I've really been working
Mhm.
on this stuff. And oh yeah, I've put 7 or 8 years into this process. Really made some good headway. And then
Mhm.
I'm like hit with this, and it's not devastating, but it's really eye-opening.
Yeah.
And it really makes me think inwardly and like, what am I blocking from myself, from even myself being able to receive? There's part of who I am that I'm rejecting because I don't want to embrace it. Like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to embrace it. I've just pretended like it's not there. And I guess I'm just saying all this because I think I'm coming into a season where I need to start embracing some of those things and bringing down some of those walls. Um, and I know that I'm not the only person on a journey of seeking oneness with the Father. So I guess I'm sharing it so that hopefully you don't have to go through so many years and then be like, oh, but what about this?
Yeah. One thing I've noticed within myself in this journey of healing is he does it with me in waves, I guess is a good way to put it. And I don't know, like, I'm thinking if he does it with me that way, he might do it with other people that way. Um, but it's like I go through a season of like kind of more focused revelation of like, this is what's going on in my life. This is what I need to fix. This is what I need to do. And then I go through a season where like everything feels great. None of that's a focus. And I honestly think that that is his grace for me.
Mm,
Um, because if it was just nonstop, you got to deal with this, you got to deal with this, you got to fix this, like that's a really tough life.
yeah.
Um, and I just think that he does that for us, for our great, for like grace for us, maybe even mercy. Like I heard someone say like grace is uh uh forgiveness for the things you did in the past, and mercy is stopping something that's currently happening.
Mm,
Um, and so I think that that is like, it could be his mercy that it's not just this constant grind on like, you got to deal with this, you got to deal with this, but it's like, okay, here's this for a season, and then you get a season of like really enjoying it. And I think that that keeps you motivated to keep doing it, to stay in the healing journey, to stay in the process of learning to love yourself more fully. Like I think that that motivates you to stay in that spot, and it's a really powerful it's a really powerful thing. And so I'm really grateful that that's how the journey's been. Um and I would say maybe for the last year or so, I've been like in a spot where I've really been enjoying like who I am and who I was created to be. And I know that there's more. Like I'm not transfigured, I'm not glowing yet. Like I know there's more to go. Um, but I'm like more aware of the times that I fall short of who I want to be. And it's like, I think that's because that has become less common. Like that's not the standard that it used to be. I think it used to be more surprising or when there was something that it was like, oh, I just did something. I really like that. And like, cause that was the more rare thing. And now at the moment, I feel like it has switched the other way where I'm more aware of the moments where I'm not that way. And I'm just grateful for that. I think that's a really cool sign of growth, but I do think that it is like mercy and grace that I don't have to deal with that all the time. I don't have to deal with the healing process all the time.
Yeah. So asking for a friend, if there was like a tip
Yeah.
for how to start on that self-love journey, what would you say?
I think anytime you're doing something that feels too big, um, can you chunk it down to something that feels attainable? I was just having this conversation with my mom actually about um like a situation that is going on that she's not a big fan of. And she's like, it feels too big to just flip that and be like, this is great. And I was like, yeah, that's totally real. But is there a small aspect of it that you can focus on that isn't so bad? And just start small. Like, it's like that saying, the only way, like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite
One
at a
bite
time.
at a time.
Like, yeah. And I think it's the same thing with healing is if you just look at the whole picture, it's too overwhelming. I need too much work still for me to just look at myself and be like, oh, I can fix that in an instant. But can I look at it and say, okay, this fraction of a fraction of a fraction is something I feel like I can address, is something I feel I can look at and deal with and process. Um, and start there. Like, can you start at a piece that feels attainable and then just grow, like, roll that into something slightly larger and roll that into something slightly larger. And like, it can be done. It doesn't have to take forever because you can start to snowball pretty quickly, but you do have to start somewhere that you're not going to choke and die on.
It's great advice, Josh.
So,
Do you think that um healing is the same as like do you think finding self-love is all encompassed by healing or do you think that's just part of the process?
I mean, it's definitely an aspect of healing. I think healing is the bigger word because it addresses more things. But I think finding self love is in and of itself like will be healing to more areas than you expected.
That's probably true. It's funny you would answer that way. I would have answered the opposite. Because I tend to see it as healing as a smaller part of it,
Oh yeah,
which I mean, just visually in my mind, you guys know this. I like, uh, I don't know, I have a visual mind. And I think like healing gets me back to the baseline and then aligning with my identity gets me,
phrases.
raises it. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, yeah. I could see that. I see that. I yeah, I could see that from that side. I Um, yeah, maybe it is that way. I don't know. But I just think that there's there are so many aspects of life that are drastically different when you start to love yourself or fall in love with yourself. Um, because I mean, even the Bible says love covers a multitude of sins. And I really think that many, 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 if not all of the chronic diseases and ailments that people have are caused because of emotional conflicts inside themselves where they
Mm.
don't know how to resolve something and their body is trying to help them sort that out. Like, I think that that is a huge piece of health. I think that's a huge piece of it. It's not the full thing, but it's a huge piece of it. There's obviously other factors like environment and diet and um, accidents and things that you have no control over. But I think there's a big piece of it that is controlled by that. And if you just simply learned to be in love, that much of that would resolve itself. And that's an aspect of healing.
Hmm. I like that phrase because it really flips it from what the traditional way of using it is. If you can learn to be in love,
Mm,
so as opposed to fall in love and be all like romantic and stuff, but can you actually place yourself
in
in the
love.
middle of love? And again, like that very core essence of who God is, can you place yourself in there, reside there, and allow yourself to take up space there? I think that's my biggest thing. As I'm saying, I'm like, oh, that's where the struggle is. Can I feel worthy of
That
taking
right
up
there.
space? Right.
Yeah.
Can I feel worthy of taking up space in that love? So here I am. This is the beginning of my knowing journey of being in love.
Yeah. Now it's time to get it into the like knowing in your head and knowing in your body. There's a difference, but
Oh,
it's
yeah,
achievable.
it is achievable. Did I ever tell you about when um, this is not the case for everyone, but faith never came easily for me? Did I ever tell you this?
I feel like maybe we've talked about it,
Maybe
but
we've talked
hit
about it.
some
Well,
highlights.
it was like I decided that I believed that Jesus was the Son of God sent and died on the cross, like the whole gospel. I made the decision to believe it, but it was a process. I had to decide every single day
Mm,
to believe it until after some amount of time, probably longer than most of you would expect. After some amount of time, I didn't have to decide anymore. It was just there. Like
yeah.
it had been decided. And it was one of those things. It was like I decided in my mind, but the rest of me had to really be convinced and come in line with that too.
Mm,
And I guess trust that this wasn't just a season,
yeah.
you know, or a flippant idea or decision.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that is, that's something a lot of people face. And I think sometimes it does just take you deciding to do it until it's there. Like, um, can you can you love an aspect of yourself until you actually really love an aspect of yourself?
Right. Right. I mean, this is how I'm seeing this process for me. Like, I need to decide to be in love and allow myself space to be in that love
Mm,
every day until I'm convinced that I should be there.
yeah, I think that's great. I think it's a really good challenge, and I hope the listeners take us up on it. Try it. Try to
Yeah.
be in love.
Yeah. I feel like this should have come out around February 14th. because we
It
could have
would
like really
would make
played with
sense
the
on the
title.
calendar.
I mean, it would make
Yeah.
sense on the calendar, but this is very timely for me.
Yeah. No, I
And
think
I
it's
hope it
important.
is for others too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Good
Well,
stuff.
thank you everyone for joining today. As always, drop us a comment if you have anything to add to the conversation. We love to hear from you. And we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Hey, thanks for listening. Keep up with us along this journey by liking, subscribing, and becoming a member through YouTube.
Members get exclusive access to bonus content with our guests, deeper dives into topics, and a look into other projects. We're glad to have you here. See you next time.